All right, I got an interesting clip here that Mario Zelaya actually posted here. It's from the Power Play session. I believe this is from today. And it looks like a couple of these panelists are very worried about the future of jobs in Canada. They think that what's happening with the Crown Royal Bottling Plant, Algoma, and Stellantis is just the beginning. Looks like a lot of those Liberal voters with their elbows up are going to need to put their elbows up when they enter the unemployment line. Either way, we're going to have a look at this. Before we do, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really does help grow the channel, and I appreciate you guys so much for that. So without further ado, let's have a look, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, and I think this sort of speaks to, like what Brian was saying, Tom, about it may not happen all at once, but there's the Stellantis story, the other car stories. Like this is, just last week, if we can remember, a few days ago, the Prime Minister was making announcements meant to help reinforce a turn to the domestic industry for steel because they have completely lost the American market. And now this sort of they're confronted with this economic reality.
Exactly. And, because I was head of the NDP and we're very close to those unions, including the steelworkers, I know that factory. I've been there. I've met those workers. And it's heartbreaking. It really is truly heartbreaking to see so close to the holiday season on top of everything else, people just being said, well, what are we going to do? Because these are good jobs. People are trained up to them and they're held on. These are lifetime jobs in many cases. And then just 1,000 families facing that. It's too much. I do think that the federal government actually got some parts of this right, because instead of handing out cash, a loan guarantee requires the company to use its own credit, but you're going to back them up on it. And I don't think that we had the time to build something where we could actually start giving grants, for example. And I think that overall it was probably the wisest course in a very rough sea, because you're trying to build something that's never been built before in response to something that's never happened to Canada before. The other thing was, of course, excluding steel from countries with which we don't have free trade agreements, essentially making it impossible for them to get into the Canadian market. We're hurting them, obviously, but we're being hurt so badly right now, and the proof of that is what just happened at Algoma. I'm afraid that Brian's right. I'm afraid that this is the beginning of something, but there will be far more of these cases. There's an old saying that, it's a recession when I lose, when my neighbor loses his job. It's a depression when I lose my job. But what we're starting to see now is people going through that. And there have been tough times before. We've had 10% and 12% unemployment before in Canada. We know what this stuff looks like. But we've never had our closest neighbor intentionally harming our economy, which is what we're going through now. And I refer us back to our previous discussion. We've got to use what we've got, including our natural resources, which is this great blessing that we have in this country. Got to do it wisely, but we got to do it quickly, because otherwise the entire economy could start to tank.
You see also the sort of disproportionate impact on the sectors that are being punished.
By the way, the fair point by Tom Mulcair there. It's a lot of families are going to have to deal with not only just losing their jobs, but if you want to be on EI, when I applied for EI, it took like 6 weeks to get approved, and then I ended up finding a job anyway. So, it's not good. It used to be 2 weeks, and then they say it's 28 days, but it could be longer than that. Some people have to wait months for it. It's really crazy. And then again, of course, the blaming Donald Trump, it's like, okay, you can do that. He obviously did put the tariffs on us, but Mark Carney said he'd have a trade deal by August. It's December. He's 4 months late, guys. Like at some point, you gotta start putting the blame on Mark Carney for not getting the deal done.
Right, that aren't covered by CUSMA, that have these 232 tariffs, like steel, like autos. Lisa, I heard you nodding when Tom said he'd been to that factory. Like, this is a third of the workforce in an area where, as the union representative on, like as I was saying, he said, like, the community cannot absorb this. There aren't enough open jobs there. Even the ones at the mines, he said, are getting overrun by applications right now. Like, that is very consequential.
It is, and I lived through it in the 80s in Cape Breton. We lost the coal mines, we lost the steel plant, we lost the cod fishery. The island has never, ever recovered, And we've had multiple amounts of government programming going in there. And it's devastating to watch a town like Sault Ste. Marie go through the exact same thing. And this is where careless thoughts or careless words like, I don't care, from the Prime Minister is going to come back to haunt him. because those links are going to be made. They knew this was coming because we don't have a deal on steel. Loan guarantees are only helpful when the company knows they're actually going to have revenues to repay the loans. If you don't have revenues coming in, nobody's going to give you a loan, even if you have a government guarantee. That's what they're up against. And without having some kind of path forward on these steel tariffs, they're not going to have any kind of possibility of putting a business plan together to get the loans. So they need more. And I don't know what the government can possibly do. But I can tell you this, that whoever wrote those lines in question period today, they better go back to the drawing board, because they were completely unacceptable. To put the burden on the worker to have to chin up and get through it is ridiculous. This is a huge problem for our country. The Prime Minister has to stand up in the House and has to address it. This is the beginning, and people are scared, Vashi. This is going to be a crappy Christmas for a lot of people who are in these sectors in this country, because they're seeing the writing on the wall. And I just say, God bless you all. It's going to be tough.
Yeah, and then that's the reality. It's going to be tough for a lot of people. And again, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I do not want people to lose their jobs. However, I refuse to have too much empathy and sympathy for those who lose their jobs but voted for it. At some point, you gotta look yourself in the mirror and say, hey, look, voting is an action. Remember, actions have consequences, right, guys? During COVID, remember that? Consequences for your actions, remember that? Well, voting's an action, and now you're facing the consequences for it. And those same dumbasses will vote Liberal for a 5th time. Those people, I can't feel bad for. I still kind of do, because they're still people, right? But it's just really difficult for me to have a lot of sympathy for getting what you voted for. I understand you could say, well, Mark Carney lied. Oh, a Liberal lied? This isn't news. They've been lying for 10 years. Well, I thought he was different. You don't know enough. You would have been better off staying home and not voting. But you didn't. Because it's your right to vote. But a lot of people don't take it seriously. They're like one-issue voters, or they're just going, oh, it's a popular... Oh, I don't like this guy. I just personally like this guy, so I'm going to vote for him. It's like his policies are... Women voted for the guy because they thought he was handsome. Personally, I don't really see it. But hey, who am I to talk about that? But either way, voting for someone because of their looks is stupid. Republican men did the same thing with Sarah Palin. John McCain got votes because of Sarah Palin, because she was an attractive woman. That's dumb. These are policies that can change our lives. The government shouldn't control your life, and you shouldn't depend on the government to have a good life. But if they actively write policies to destroy things, and you vote for it, what sense does that make? It truly is insane. And I get it. A lot of people, especially young people, hey, Mark Carney is going to be like John Crescent. He's going to, restore the economy, and things are going to be like what they were in the 90s. That's a pipe dream. Just like the pipeline. That's never going to happen. And by the way, even with Pierre, we're not going back to the 90s. It's never going to happen. You just want the economy to grow faster than inflation, than the job market, than the housing market. And, maybe keep a criminal or two in prison. Probably a good idea, right? Maybe not import more people than we can support, right? Probably a good idea. Math, I know liberals and math don't really get along too well. Well, liberals and math and common sense and history and all those lovely things, they don't really seem to understand those things. But they keep lying to you, and they keep winning elections, so why the hell would they stop? You, as a voter, has to stop voting for the party who's actively destroying the country and getting rich off of it. When are you going to understand? I don't know. The staunch liberals are never going to get. They're going to need like some sort of epiphany to change. But swing voters? Come on, man. It's enough of this liberal garbage. It's time for a conservative era, and if Pierre doesn't do what he's supposed to do, we're going to call him out too. I am not a staunch conservative. I will turn on Pierre Poilievre if he turns on his policies. But there's too many liberals who just keep giving the liberals a chance because they think the conservatives are the evil ones. And I'm getting sick of it.